Okay, so with these sanctions and business pullbacks, what is the impact on Russia's economy so far? Well, for more on that, I'm joined by Dan Ives. He is the Managing Director of Equity Research at Wedbush Securities. Dan, thanks very much for joining us. I want to get right to it. The Russian economy is simply taking a beating at this point. Each day, more and more nations, more and more private companies steering clear of Moscow. What is the state of the economy right now? And I guess more to the point, how much more can it take, and what is the economy going to look like in a week or two?
Yeah, look, I think it's pretty ominous. If you look over the coming weeks and months as these sanctions kick in, I mean, it's going to take some time for it to really go through the system, but it's almost a decoupling from the rest of the world economy. And that's something that's troubling, especially within Russia. But of course, this is a situation where, the world sort of speaking. And if you look at the sanctions, I think the initial sanctions are one that were viewed not really going to impact it. These obviously significant, especially when it comes to the Federal Reserve and some other issues.
Yeah, and break it down for me. Which economic punishment so far has been the most detrimental? We have SWIFT, the freezing of central bank assets, and to say nothing of the actions taken against Vladimir Putin and his close friends.
Well, I think SWIFT is the first one. That was the gut punch, because by doing that, basically takes really from a transaction perspective and from a banking, it really isolates the Russian economy. And that's had the massive effect on the ruble. We saw that starting late last night. And then you look at some of the sanctions in terms of, central bank. I mean, that's significant because ultimately that would give them the ability to really prop up their currency. Instead, all the tools are now taken away from them, which is why you're really starting to slowly see a collapse of the Russian economy.
Yeah, and I think that really the people in the streets in large cities are feeling it right now. Look at the people lined up at ATMs in Russia. What is this run on banks doing? And I think you talked about it, the SWIFT being a gut punch and isolating the economy. And really, we're seeing that. What is this doing to Russia's confidence in Putin?
Well, I think that's what we really need to see as it plays out, but it's essentially a bank run. And you're starting to see industry by industry more and more an isolation of Russia. Not just from a transportation perspective, but from, banks really can't do business with them. And that's significant, especially when you think in terms of the broader economy and globally. This is something where it's really the world against Russia at this point because of obviously the horrific situation that we're seeing in Ukraine. And from an economy perspective, it's almost like slowly taking oxygen out of the economy. It's going to take time for this to come out, but I think when we look out 3-4 weeks, it's just going to be some extremely dark days for the Russian economy.
Let's pick up on that. How are the consumers in Russia getting by? The ruble, we talked about earlier, is sinking some 30%. Interest rates at more than 20% now, doubling in just one day. What are consumers thinking at this point? And do you expect to see some pushback within Russia against what is going on and what led to these punishing economic sanctions?
Well, I think you're going to see more demonstrations. We've already started to see that obviously over the weekend. But I think that's going to, exacerbate just given from a consumer perspective what they're facing. And I think, again, a lot more of the pain is ahead because there's a lag effect until you start to actually see it. And I think slowly you start to see more oxygen get taken out of the economy. And that's why I think as we go into March, it's going to be, I think you could really start to see more of this bank run take place.
China is still buying a lot of oil and gas from Russia. What is this allowing Moscow to do? And I want to follow up with that with Western countries are still allowing Russia to sell oil and gas. But if that spigot was to shut off, then what?
Well, I think to that extent, Europe, obviously Germany gets still 35% of their gas from Russia. So, you're going to start to see that slowly wean themselves off. Of course, in terms on the China side, that's something that's obviously benefiting Russia. But when it comes to oil and gas, you take that away and you're starting to see that sort of wean themselves off. That's something for the longer term from an economy perspective. It's significantly troubling for Russia, especially as it gets more and more isolated. And that's why this is a fork in the road. I mean, in terms of what we're seeing in Ukraine, I saw more Ukraine T-shirts in New York City than New York Knicks T-shirts today. So I think that this is something that's not going to, it's just only going to accelerate in terms of the pain on the Russian economy.
Dan, we don't have a lot of time, but who does Russia turn to at this point?
I think right now this is just going to be about internally demonstrations, and I think that's going to pick up, and this is really going to be I think the world's watching to see the moment and to see Putin's next move. But obviously, the heartbreak that everyone's seeing out of Ukraine, that's on everyone's thoughts and prayers.
Well said. Dan Ives, Managing Director of Equity Research, Wedbush Securities. We appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, stay with us, everybody. We're focused